The traditional sales funnel doesn't work quite the way it used to, but because buyers are really in control now more than ever. In this episode, Ryan Frederick explains why most go to market strategies fall short today and how smart businesses are shifting from chasing leads to owning their category. If you want your offers to stand out and stick, don't miss this conversation. Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan, your host, lead machine coach, and the founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Group and Mastermind. I'm dedicated to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream life. So, whether you're just starting out or you want to take your business to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyan, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
Our guest today is Ryan Frederick. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, author, and investor who helps businesses thrive in today's rapid tech transformation world. He's launched and scaled multiple companies, advised startups and Fortune 500s, and now leads Transform Labs, helping teams create, market, and lead their own categories. He's the author of The Founder's Manual and Sell Naked, which is an interesting topic. And he's on a mission to fix the broken go-to-market playbook. He helps bring both big picture insight and practical steps for small business owners ready to grow. So stay tuned. Ryan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming. We were just talking about how we're both in the Midwest and comparing our notes on where we came from. So welcome again. I appreciate it.
Paul, thank you for having me. And yes, it proves that Wolverines and Buckeyes can indeed get along.
We can get along just fine. In fact, I don't really have any of that deep-seated hatred that some people do. I mean, I don't get it, but it's just, it's you gotta, I guess you gotta have someone to try to beat, right?
Especially when it comes to college football, apparently.
What college football? Yeah. So, my brother went to U of M, and his kids went to state. So there's another rivalry there, right within the family. So
yeah, that's the in-state rivalry, right? Yeah,
yeah,
which is also heated and severe.
It is very. So let's just jump into our questions, because we both, it's that time of day that we both want to get on with the rest of our day with grilling and having dinner and all that stuff. So. You say go to market. So what is go to market for those of us who don't really understand the marketing terminology, and why is it harder than ever before and how do we get there?
Yeah, I think go to market is now a sort of umbrella term for marketing, sales, business development. It's really a catch-all for, we are trying to take an offering, a product, a service to the market for them to ultimately become customers or clients. So it's kind of a catch-all term, right? Go to market. And I think that everybody is experiencing the fact that go to market, and if we break that down, marketing, sales, business development, lead generation, et cetera, sales funnels, it's harder than it's ever been. Yeah. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. You mentioned one in the opening, that customers are now in charge of the buying process. And if we ever had a legitimate sales funnel that were credible and useful, that's even sort of out the window, because the sales funnel is now more like a maze where prospects go in and out of it when they choose and how they choose. And you might see somebody 9 months ago that engages with you and then seems to ghost you and disappear. And then 9 months later, they reappear. And then
Mhm.
they're maybe even ready to have a buying conversation. And it seems like nothing happened in those 9 months, yet in their mind, a lot happened, right? They probably did a lot of research. They probably did some competitive analysis. They probably looked at options. They probably were even coming to terms with the fact of, do they want to make this purchase decision and
Yeah.
move forward, right? And so,
And with whom?
and with whom, right?
Yeah.
Because there's
Mhm.
also optionality across every domain, right? We want to think of ourselves and our businesses as being special snowflakes and adding value that customers couldn't get other places. That's not the reality. Most of us have hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors for what we do. And so
Yeah.
there's a little bit of humble pie that goes with this too, of why go to market's broken. Buyers have more options than they've ever had before, and options that look very similar, right? The competitive landscape now is pretty even. Most companies don't look and don't go to market much differently than their competitors. So it's hard for customers to even sort of ferret out, like, how is this company different and better? And otherwise, how am I going to have an experience, right, that's more unusual with them than it might be with one of their competitors?
Yeah. So being amazed like that, and yeah, you're right. And of course, my mind is going to, okay, there's ways to adjust to that. So how do small business owners uh, who really don't understand all that, but they just know that they've got a great product and they've got happy customers. What do they do? What are some of the things that they can do to adjust their sales process and whatever else is part of their go-to marketing stack to adjust it, to adapt to it?
Yeah, one of the things that I think really matters now is creating and defining a category that you can own. And
Mhm.
sometimes it means something that is wholly new, right? That the market has never seen before and experienced before. And sometimes it only has to be a couple of degrees different than
Yeah.
what the market has seen. So I think that's where people around category creation get a little sideways, is they're like, oh, well, we're supposed to innovate something entirely new and we're supposed to create something that's never existed. Sure, if that's on the table, right? If that's possible, but it also might be that you're just a couple of degrees different enough, right? That you can create a new category. A really good example around this is there was a beverage company, Poppy, that recently sold to Pepsi. And Poppy is a prebiotic soda. So it's a healthy soda. And most people would have said when they were starting, why are you starting a soda company? We don't need another beverage company, etc. But they were convinced that a prebiotic healthy soda that people wanted to drink bubbly, beverages, but have it be good for them, was a category that would make sense. And they were right. And so that's an
Yeah.
example of, you don't have to go out and create an entirely new industry. You just have to look for things inside of your existing market often, where you can say, you know what? There is no healthy soda. Man, would that be interesting? And what could that play? And would customers value that, right? And is the timing right for it? So I think creating a category sometimes is intimidating, but sometimes I think it's closer to many of us than we actually think it is.
Yeah, when you mentioned, I like the idea of creating a category. Of course, I did a little bit of research, but what that reminds me of, and I didn't think of that until just now, was of course, you know who Dan Kennedy is, like the direct marketing guru. And by the way, he's still living. And you know Dan Kennedy. He tells a story about a guy who's a butcher. How do you create a category if you're a butcher? Well, he was the hugging butcher. He hugged all his customers, and people came from miles around to avail themselves of this great guy who had a great personality, and he's a hugger. He likes to hug, and that's how he differentiated his regular, pretty. He sold beef and pork and chicken and fish, and you know, probably didn't specialize in much, but people went to him because he had good marketing. Is it more than that, or can it be that?
I think ultimately, if you're creating a category, it's more than that, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. And the reason that it worked for him and it worked for Poppy and it works for others who define and create a category for themselves is that it's very deep rooted. It's their identity. It's
Yeah.
their principle, right? That
Hmm.
it wouldn't have worked if the hugging butcher actually was an introvert and a germaphobe and didn't like interacting with people and didn't like socializing with people, because
Yeah.
it would have been a character and it would have been an act and it would have been transparent. So it was really a representation of how he wanted to run his business. And it turned out that being the hugging butcher actually created a paradigm that separated him from the other butchers. There's a book on creating categories, and there's several books on it, but so this is not like Ryan's like creation of category creation being unique to Ryan. And one of
Yeah.
the examples in one of the books is a real estate agent who was competing in a very wealthy area for multi-million dollar home sales, ultimately positioned herself as sort of the mansion bargain hunter. And her objective was that she was going to wait until some of these mansions were on the block for like 90 days or more and hadn't sold. And then she was going to represent her buyer going after less than, ideal properties, but they could buy them at a discount. Right. And so
Yeah.
that's a very similar story to the hugging butcher. And I think
Hmm.
anybody, if they step back and say, hey, is there room for us to define ourselves in a way that is specific to us and that speaks to us only, right, to our customers? I think they're on the verge of creating a category.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once you've done that, you can create your messaging and your value propositions and that around that to support it, right?
Absolutely. Then you get into sort of the execution of, and then you can have your brand, right, have more resonance because you're now defining this category. And I think that's where people often get branding wrong is you can have a really great brand, but it's not differentiating from your competition because your competition probably also has a really good brand, right?
Mhm.
In this environment, nobody's phoning it in on brand, right? Everybody's got a good logo, everybody's got a good website, right? And so there's no differentiation, there's no separation. Creating a category actually creates a competitive moat where now other people have to react to what you're doing. And so it becomes much easier for you to create now brand resonance and messaging and value proposition, et cetera, because now you sort of plant a flag on the top of a hill when you're creating a category. And then your competitors are now trying to sort of all chase each other up the hill to like try to compete with you after you've defined this new category.
Right. And it's too late. It's too late when you do that. I mean, what was it? The what, the cigarette manufacturer, when the Surgeon General came out and said cigarette smoking can cause cancer. Um, well, they all do the same things to prepare the tobacco, but I think was it Winston? They said that theirs was toasted, so that they were the only one who claimed that they were toasted. Or there was a beer company that differentiated themselves by they used the clear water from wherever it was, wherever Coors is,
Yeah,
the Colorado, the
Golden,
Golden
Colorado, I think.
Colorado. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And then there was another one who did this purification process that no one else claimed to do, but they all did it. So It's like that, but then there's more to it than that. I think it's also the customer experience, the onboarding, the moral character, the the personality behind the business too. Don't you agree that that there's something that needs to be developed there as well?
Absolutely. And it when you create a category, it is fundamentally anti-competitive. Doesn't mean you won't compete eventually, because people
Yeah,
are going to see that you're creating the category, and then they're going to try to compete, and they're going to copy you, and then they're going to try to compete. So it's not like creating a category makes things competition free, but
right.
it is anti-competitive for at least for some period of time. And then you hope by creating a category that you have not a head start that you can maintain over time. Um, and when you think about category creation, every technology startup that is now a household name created a category, and
Mm,
they won the space, right? When you think of ride sharing, it's more commonly referred to as order an Uber, get an Uber, than it is get a Lyft, right? Which
yep,
is,
right.
now pales in comparison to Uber's, market value. When you look at Amazon, Amazon started out being an online bookseller, right? Which was category creating, but then, and this also true is part of category creation. Often you start out defining and creating a niche category
Hmm.
that, if it works in that niche, you can then expand way beyond that. And so Amazon's a good example. Started out as an online bookseller. Now they're the largest online retailer, right, the world has ever seen. So
Yeah.
category creation can also start really niche and narrow, and then really explode based upon your success and the gravity of the niche that you've captured. And of course, the scalability of it. But every technology company and startup that we could name, right, that's successful is in part successful because they created a category that people had to then sort of acknowledge over a period of time to go, okay, yes, this is now the category representative for this, and everybody else sort of follows them.
Yeah, like Dropbox or Facebook or yeah, lots of companies like that that you know even Twitter Twitter for sure they're just a different way of communicating and appearing on the market.
Absolutely. Dropbox is a great example, right? I mean, before
Yeah,
that, we were passing around jump drives with big files on it, right? And
yeah,
then when Dropbox started, people then went, oh, well, this can be done, on the web and in the cloud, et cetera. Well, clearly that's a better way of doing it, but it had to get created. It had to get to, the web-based sort of file sharing had to get defined and created, which they did.
right. And we could go on and on. PayPal is another one. Uh, Disruption is a way. So, how can a small solo entrepreneur or a small team make a category like that that's meaningful? That where do you start with that?
Yeah, you sort of have to start at the place where what would be core to you, but but unexpected by the market. Because when you
Yeah,
create a category, there is a little bit of education, there is a little bit of behavior change that you're going to ask from the market.
yeah,
And so you've got to think about what's core to you so that you're not, being, a fake it till you make it or an imposter around the category you're creating, right? What's in your
right.
DNA? And that would be unexpected in a high value way to your market and to your customers. And so that's the easiest way to sort of think about it for most existing companies is, and the other lens that I like to refer to it as is, how do you see the world and your customers and what you do differently than everybody else sees it? Because wrapped inside of that aperture is probably the opportunity to define and create a category.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds possible. I mean, it could be as simple as being the hugging butcher, but it does go deeper than that.
It
So
does. Actually, creating a category is a tremendous amount of work. I don't want to shy away from that and make anybody think that it seems easy or it's fast. It's neither of those things, but it is one of the things that, and why it's worth it is if you can define and create a category that becomes a winning category and you're the leader in it, now you become magnetic. That's why we know the drop boxes, right? And the Ubers and all the examples you go over is because it becomes so attractive to customers that now you can market and you don't have to compete in the same way because you took the time, effort, and energy to define and create that category.
yeah, yeah. So it takes time. So we could spend a lot more time on that, but what are the first signs that a business is marketing like everyone else, and what can they do instead?
Yeah, the first signs are, yeah, I think when, and we all know this because we if we're being intellectually honest with ourselves, like
Mhm.
when we show up at a conference, a trade show for our industry, if we see a competitor's email, campaign or their email newsletter, and our booth looks just like their booth, our email looks just like their email, our newsletter looks just like their email newsletter, you sort of know that you're not differentiating and you are all going to market in basically the same way. If
Mhm.
again, if we're going to be intellectually honest about it, right? I think it becomes pretty obvious when there isn't very much differentiation and there isn't much uniqueness. And part of it becomes if you humans also aren't that great at change and we don't like to be challenged to think, etc.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if we start using an email platform to send out our email campaigns and our email newsletter, et cetera, and we see that there are 2 million other people using that particular email platform, we're going to sort of mentally go, check, right? We're doing email marketing. Well, doing email marketing along with 2 million or 3 million other people using that same platform, right? Now means that if your competitors are in that mix, you're looking just like they are in email to your prospects and potential customers, and that's probably not good. But we also want the familiarity of, oh, I use this email platform because so many other people use it. But when you get trapped in tools, it also means that you're probably looking like your competitors, even if you don't mean to, just because you're now implementing the same sort of marketing tech stack that they are even. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And in some ways, that's kind of a double-edged sword too, because when you our inboxes are coveted space these days, and we get a lot of crap. And if we see something coming from you know Mailchimp or Aweber or even Infusionsoft, some of those, they're called Keep now. Um, some of those platforms are more trustworthy than maybe, I don't know, something that you don't recognize, like SendMail or Constant Contact or whatever. There's some majors out there, but uh, people who are in marketing uh, sign up for newsletters, and they kind of know. I would sign up to my competitors' newsletters, so I know what they're doing, and so I would know what platforms they're on. But there's putting yourself on a platform is a long term play when you're talking about email, because if you want to have grow subscribers, it's hard to move them, and you lose a lot when you do.
It
And
is absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and I think that the other thing, around trade shows and conferences and other things that people go to, I feel strongly and always have in the companies that I started previously and now at the companies that I'm a part of owning and running, that I want to go where my customers are and my competitors aren't. So
Mhm.
if the customer that I want to speak to are also owners of businesses, I'm probably not going to show up at the, business owner annual conference thing that's put on by, the some statewide organization around company ownership, right? Because all the competitors are going to be there too. But what I
Yeah.
might do is then go look and say, okay, where am I? And this goes back to a little bit about category creation. Is in creating a category, you also have to know, where does your customer live, not, personally, where do they live professionally?
Where do they gather? Right.
Right. And if that might mean that you have to get a membership to the athletic club in town, and you start having lunch at the athletic club, right? And it might mean that you get on nonprofit boards, right? Instead of showing up at the business owner conference, right? So you've also got to think about, where can I
Mm.
show up that my customers are, that my competitors aren't going to be, or at least not in mass, right? When I'm there, right? And so part of category creation is, who's my customer, where do they live, and how can I get some visibility with them that is anti-competitive as part of defining the category, and then getting visibility that allows my category to actually resonate.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way uh, to position yourself. And it's a heck of a lot easier when there are less options for them to, for them to see. Like you're talking about the many, many, many options that they're going to have at a big industry conference. So that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and comparison and competition equals margin erosion,
Yeah.
right? Because the more competitors that a prospective customer can consider and is considering, means that even if they choose you, they're probably going to ask for some sort of special rate, some discount that's going to eat into your profit. And so the only way to really maintain profit margins these days is that you have to show up in a way and in places where your competitors aren't, so that you have time to develop a relationship that earns you the credibility, right? So that you can get the profit that you want, and not be in a comparison mode that is going to ultimately eat into your profit.
Right. Yeah. Totally makes sense. So what about one of the things that I really like to teach is speed to the speed at which you reply and you engage with leads. And there's short term and there's long term lead generation. Uh, how do you balance that with regard to positioning? And do you think that speed and response and nurturing is more important than ever?
I think it is, and I think that, um, and I've got a coach that I work with around some aspects of my businesses, and one of his philosophies, and I agree with him, is he now believes that the world is broken into 95 and 5, in that at any given moment, 95% of your prospective customers are not in a position to buy what you do, and
Hmm.
5% are. And we can move the percentage numbers around, but in theory, he's saying the bulk of the world isn't interested in, or isn't ready to buy what you're selling at this moment, and 5% are. So in his mind, what you're trying to do is identify who are the 5%, right?
Yeah.
Not that you're trying to you ignore the 95%. To your point, you
For
want
sure.
to
Yeah.
you want to nurture a relationship with them, right? And you want to look at some long tail marketing with them, right? Long term
Mhm.
content, some thought leadership stuff, social media, etc. The
Yeah.
5% that are ready to buy what you're doing now, right? It is something that needs a little bit more sensitivity, responsiveness, and also the acknowledgement: is this a 5%er or is this a 95%er? And if they're 5%er, you better sort of, bring everything to the table in that moment, right? To get that, to win that customer. If they're a 95 percenter, immediately sort of wash your hands of them and say, all right, they're going into the 95 bucket. They're going to get the long tail marketing.
Yeah. Well, and the 5 percenters might get that eventually, but yeah, that you have to have your systems designed, I believe, so that you can prioritize that by the kinds of interaction that they're doing with your brand, whether it be, through a social channel, through the newspaper or through a magazine, offline sources as well, or the telephone. So you can prioritize and then maybe escalate that to a human connection. Uh, so that you can engage with them on a personal level. But you've got to have that automation in place to be able to do that.
Yes. And one of the things that he points to, and that I believe is that one of the qualifiers to be in the 95 or 5 is, does the prospective customer raise their hand for a human interaction
Yeah.
and agree to it? And if they don't, they're probably not a 5%er. They're probably in the 95, even though they have lots of ingredients and attributes that make them look like a 5%er. If they won't agree to interact with the human, they're probably not ready to buy, because what do we do when we're ready to buy? We want to interact with the human around that purchase in most
Right.
cases, right? Not
We're,
every
we're,
product,
we're
not every service, but
yeah, yeah. At that point, we've done our exploration. We've wandered around long enough. We figured it out. We've done the research like we talked about earlier, and then now they're seeking someone to scratch that itch that they've got, and that and that's when you've got them, and that's where you've got to, like I said, escalate to a human being.
right. And it's, and this, people often wonder why, when they go in to buy a car, right, does the car dealership sales team not want them to leave, right, the dealership? And it's because of this 95-5, right, premise that auto dealers figured out a long time ago, that if someone shows up on your lot, right, walks in your dealership, or even inquires online now, right, about buying a car, right,
Yeah,
they're qualifying them into the 5, themselves into the 5, right? And if there's any way possible that you can then sell them a car, you better, because you're going to let a 5%er walk out the door and go buy a competitive product because they're already mentally ready to buy. It's just a question
yeah,
of whether they buy the Toyota or the Honda.
or from you or from someone else.
Right. Or the other Honda dealer, right, that's 15 miles up the highway.
Right, right, right. So when we were talking about owning our own space, how do we do that, or our own category, let's say? How do we do that without shooting ourselves in the foot or blowing up our current offer?
Yeah, it's a balance, because especially if you've been around for a while, right? You don't necessarily want this new category creation piece to make people think that now the legacy is irrelevant, right? Or the history, right?
Yeah,
Is no longer valid, because you actually want to use that in the creation of the category, so that the new category has more validation than if it was just a net new thing, right? From an entirely new company.
yeah,
Um, you also have to be, another caveat inside of that is, you've got to be a little bit bold. You've got to be a little bit courageous, but you also can't be obnoxious, right? So we've all seen the brands that have come out and tried to create categories that were too slapstick, that were too sort of, based in like silly humor that really didn't stick, right? And so you don't want to be the butt of anybody's joke in creating a category. And that's why it's got to be core to your DNA and your values and your principles as an organization, and even as maybe an owner of a company, depending on the size of the company. And so anybody should be able to look at the new category and the new company and the new positioning and say, I get it, right? The hugging
mhm,
butcher was a butcher before he probably started hugging everybody, right? And he figured out
yeah,
that that was part of his DNA, and that also made him stand out. It's not like he left the butchering behind. He just added another layer to it, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when you started talking about the brands that blew up, I kept thinking of the Burger King, the King, you know, the Burger King with the real creepy looking guy who was showed up on those commercials. It just that was I I I love Burger King, but I don't eat there very often anymore. But uh, that guy just creeped me out. He's way better. Ronald McDonald was way better, way safer for me. But that's crazy. So we we've gone through a few things. What have I haven't I asked, or wish did you wish that other podcasters would ask you uh, in an interview? I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, I think the thing around category creation that is most underappreciated or understood is that it is a it's a effort and a craft that is very layered and nuanced. And most people think, well, if I just come up with a new slogan, right, that's good enough. If I come up with new positioning, that's good enough. If I come up with new messaging, that's good enough. If I come up with new branding, that's good enough. And those are components of creating and defining a category, but none of those things in and of themselves actually defines and creates a category. And so category creation is more rudimentary than that. And it is about this triangle of understanding yourself, what your value proposition is, or could be, right? If indeed you're gonna divert a little bit. What does the market sort of want? How does it address a market problem or need, right? And then how
Mhm.
are you going to connect those dots, right? And so that's why it takes a fair amount of work and introspection and analysis and research, because it isn't just, hey, we come up with a new tagline and we're good, right? That's not category creation. So it's much harder and more complicated than people initially think that it is. Because if you think about category creation from foundationally, right? If you were to be starting a new business, you would want to start it with category creation in mind and define that
Mhm.
category starting it. If you're an existing business, it's a harder transition because now you've got to sort of you've got to be honest about the fact that you're not going to engender the new category with a bunch of legacy perspective that may actually hold the category back versus letting the category sort of flourish. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. Uh, and so you have been working with people for, I assume, for quite a while with these ideas. You've got several books. I'm going to ask you about your Sell Naked book in a second. But what are some of the successes that you've had, or and maybe a dismal failure that you can share with us that can help us ward off some of those missteps?
Yeah. So fortunately, I've been part of starting some companies that had successful exits. And
Uh,
in retrospect, even if we didn't know that we were creating and defining a category, we were, because
yeah.
I've sort of always instinctually leaned in that direction.
Hmm.
I now get to mentor founders who are starting companies through various programs like Techstars and Founders Institute and some others. And I advise any of them that I get the chance to mentor that make sure that you're creating and defining a category that you can own and lead, because it can be the difference between it working and not working, raising money and not raising money, right? Selling customers. And it also helps with marketing, because when you define and create a category, the marketing, messaging, the value proposition, all of it comes into focus much faster and better,
Yeah.
and the clarity is much better. Um,
Yeah.
One of the companies that I was a part of starting, though, um, we we got too smart for our own good, and we we were sort of defining. We were well. And that's probably even that sort of explanation of it is probably, where it all started to go wrong. We sort of created a category.
Yeah.
We like partially created a category. We went like a third of the way there. And then we went, well, yeah, this is probably good enough. Right. And then of course it turned out not to be good enough. And we burned through a bunch of money. We wasted a bunch of time. Right. And we ended up having to shut the company down because we made so many mistakes by convincing ourselves that we were doing what we had done in the past, even though we were sort of, doing it, in a very incomplete way. I was going to use more colorful language than that, but I'll keep it, a family show. Um,
Yeah.
and so I've seen it go really well where defining, creating and owning a category is a key part of success. And I've seen doing it haphazardly be part of the reason that failure happens.
Yeah. That's true in anything. I think that's true in life and business and relationships and everything. If you do it as you were going to say half-ass, you're going to get half-ass results. So and yeah, this is a clean show, and sorry about that, folks. So I have to ask you, I love the title, Sell Naked. Can you tell us what that's about?
Yes, and thank you. It is the chapter title for one of the chapters in the book. And it was that way when I sent it to the publisher. And because I didn't have a name for the book at that point. And so they
Mhm.
came back and said, well, the title of the book has to be Sell Naked because that's the most provocative and thought-provoking chapter in the book. And I hemmed and hawed about it at first because I was like, not sure that I want to be that provocative, right? And they were like,
Yeah.
no, it really has to be, right? And so, the publisher was the one that took the title of one of the chapters and said it should be the title. And that chapter basically, and I believed this for a long time. That's why I wrote the chapter, and it's in the book. Is too many salespeople go into meetings with prospective customers with too much propaganda and too many crutches. So they go in with all of these case studies and all of these decks and all these proposals and all this research, et cetera, et cetera, when all the prospect wants to do is have a conversation about their situation for you to then understand you have the ability to be an applicable fit, right, to solve their situation. And initially that happens through conversation. It doesn't happen
Yeah.
by you pitching, by you presenting, right? By you trying to woo them, like with your PowerPoint skills, et cetera. So I've always sold whatever company that I was starting or I'd been a part of. I've always done it in a way where I just go in to have a conversation with the prospective client to say, okay, why are we talking? Like, why are we here today? Why are we meeting? And if you open it up that way, they will tell you exactly what their problem is. Now, they may not know what the solution is, and that's why you're there.
That's why
So then
you're there. Yeah.
it's your job to then connect the dots, right? But if you go in pitching, you may never even hear what the prospective client's real problem is because you're too busy pitching your stuff, right? So that's the premise of that chapter. It's kind of the premise of the book, although it goes into more sort of detail around selling. Because when I joined Transform Labs, which is a technology advisory firm that I'm now a part owner in, that was my first opportunity to own a services firm. And selling services and marketing services is very different than selling and marketing a product company. And so I wrote
Yeah.
the book mostly based upon my experience now running a professional services firm and all of
Wow.
the learnings that I got as part of it. And Sell Naked was one of them.
Right. Well, I love that. I love the title, and you're exactly right. I went to a seminar back in the '80s called Consultative Selling, and it was put on by Progress Software, and which used to be a software developer many years ago, and to this day, that's just the best way to to approach that kind of meeting. It's just, it is, I wouldn't say, why are we here? Because I would know, we both know why we're here. Um, but yeah, having a conversation is a great way to do it. And it takes, it takes a little different mindset to do that. And if you really are interested in providing a solution and, you know, win for both of you and for the customers, there's more than just you and your customer. There's their customer too that has to win with whatever the solution is. So you really got to listen more than talk, I believe. And I learned that from Ben Gay the third. I don't know if you know him. He's one of the original salespeople. He actually was the CEO of Holiday Magic, and Zig Ziglar uh, actually worked for him. So that was pretty crazy. Um, so Ryan, as we wrap up with your final words, and I've really enjoyed this conversation, uh, what are three things our listeners can do to put some of these ideas into action?
The first thing I would say is think about how, if you're starting something, create a category around it and take the time and effort to create and define a category that you can lead. If you're an existing business and you are finding flat revenue and growth is hard, and the business development challenges are real and present for you, and there's a lot of similarity, right? And it's hard for you to differentiate. Think about how you can pivot and redirect to defining and owning and leading a category that still represents you, but is going to resonate better with your customers in the market than just sort of slogging it out, right? And hoping that you get your fair share of the pie. The second thing I would say is then don't cut the category, process short, like I did in the one failure that I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some thought. It's going to take a lot of real, analysis and sort of soul searching, because it's probably not going to be obvious. It's probably gonna take some cycles, right, to get there, or to get to something that you believe in and then you can stand behind and that you want to own as a category. And the third thing is where I left off with the second one is you've got to feel good about the category that you're defining, because
Yeah.
if you're to define it and own it, right, you better be comfortable being the hugging butcher, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you don't want to own it, then that's the wrong category. Go define another one. Because the worst thing you can do is to find a category that you actually don't want to own and be attached to, because that is not going to work. And
No.
you want to have complete extreme ownership of the category that you create.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much again. You also have a complimentary category creating coaching session. Can you tell us about that and how people can get that?
Yeah, if people are interested, I'm happy to sit down with them and talk about where they are and what a category looks like, and then a path to creating and defining a category that they can own. And the website is uncommongtm.com, and the GTM stands for go to market for those that don't know. And there's a number on there that you can text. You'll see that it's a very intentionally sort of an uncommon website. There's no pictures. There's just text about being different, being unique, positioning yourselves differently. And then there's no form to fill out. Just text that number. That number ultimately texts and finds its way to me. And then I'll get back to people that are interested. And we will sell naked. We will just sit down and have a conversation about what the ability for somebody to go define and own a category is.
Yeah, and also you have a note here to text my name, Paul Guyon, to the number listed so you know where it came from.
Yes, good call out. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Ryan, Frederick, thank you again. Let's all go sell naked and create our categories and lead our markets and just crush it. But as we sign off, remember faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal until next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyan and Ryan Frederick. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it.
Paul, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyan, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.